Well, we all want to see these transfers play, but that's going to be a while. So first we hear them talk, and we will get the responses from Kevin, from Steve, and probably from Tony. We're here on Buckeyes Live every Wednesday, 11 a.m. Eastern time, but we've got schedules to coordinate. So that's why it's important to subscribe to the channel and hit that bell for the notifications. Please give us a like and leave those comments and questions in the chat. And the super chat is available. Kevin Noon right next to me. BuckeyeHuddle.com, the Big Me podcast as well. Lock it in there. Steve Hellwagon, Bucknuts, 247 Sports. All right, Steve, let's start with you. So all the transfers talk to the media except Julian Sayin, from what I understand. And what stood out to you?
Well, I think you had to be impressed. I think that all these guys came in and made a really good first impression. I wrote a story about Will Howard's segment. I listened to just about all of it, and very impressed with him. Understands what the mission is at Ohio State, what the expectations are. Said he came here to possibly, have a chance to win a national championship. Said it came down, he had Miami and USC were also kind of involved for him, but said if he hadn't decided to come back to college, at Ohio State, he was probably going to go and enter the NFL draft. Said that his draft grade was only 3rd to 6th round, and he thinks he's got better ability than that. And, from his standpoint, when he made the decision, probably sometime in December, I know he announced it on January the 4th, he was coming to work with Ryan Day, and Corey Dennis was going to be his quarterback coach. Well, about a week later, they, removed Corey Dennis from that job and slipped Bill O'Brien in there. And obviously Bill O'Brien, a veteran coach. So this was not the first time or the only time we would hear Bill O'Brien's name yesterday. Seth McLaughlin worked with Bill O'Brien directly at Alabama 2 years ago, and he gave him a glowing review, said he's looking forward to working with him again, says he's just a great no-nonsense type guy, a professional, and looking forward to the opportunity to rekindle that relationship and play with him again. McLaughlin figures to be the center at Ohio State this coming year. That's what it looks like, that he's coming into play center. I mean, I suppose he could play guard if Carson Hinsman maintains the center position. I honestly don't know, sitting here today on January the 31st, how that's all going to shake out. But so those two guys, very impressive. I spent some time listening to Will Kazmarek, the tight end from Ohio University. Really interesting story. 2 years ago, coming out of St. Louis, Missouri, same high school as Jalen Pace, the son of former Buckeye Orlando Pace, who's on the team as a walk-on. And so those two guys reunited, said that everybody at Ohio University was happy for him to have the opportunity to go play in the Big Ten. And he says it was just his dream to play at the highest level. So that's why he made the jump to come from Ohio University to Ohio State. Says he notices the tight ends can catch passes and also be involved heavily in the blocking and everything else. So he's right out of central casting, it seems like, for what a tight end at Ohio State ought to look like. 20 catches last 2 years at Ohio University. So I think you got to be happy about his situation. And then I didn't spend a whole lot of time listening to Caleb Downs, but I know that everybody who did was very impressed with him. And I think the same thing for Quinshon Judkins. One of the funny moments, somebody asked him, where his name Quinshon comes from, and he just said, well, my mom and dad. So aren't we all named by our parents? So that was kind of a humorous moment in the morning's festivities yesterday. So yeah, I was generally impressed with what I saw and heard from those five guys. And I think that it's not a stretch or a reach to think that all five of those guys are going to play starring roles on this team. All of them fill needs on this team. and fill holes on this team. And I think it's got to be an exciting time. A funny thing, somebody on our board was asking about Caleb Downs, and that's great. He did that at Alabama. He hasn't done anything at Ohio State. He needs to prove himself at Ohio State. Start him out at fourth team, and have him work his way up. And I'm like, yeah, I'm sure that's how that's going to happen. Just as Will Howard is going to start out, behind Lincoln Keenholz and Devin Brown and work his way up. Sure. So I said, I don't think that's going to happen. So that was a lot of what I saw and heard yesterday. And again, I think you got to be real excited about the direction things are headed when you add these kind of quality people, I think, to your mix.
Kevin.
Yeah, I was in on the Quinshon Judkins interview. I was running 3 cameras, so when you're running 3 cameras, you really don't get to hear much of anything. You're just minding 3 cameras.
Wow.
With Quinshon, very excited for the opportunity. Not there was a day and age where backs were all about wanting to be the feature back and get 30 carries a game, and he understands already making the business decision of trying to keep tread on the tires. Really excited about partnering with Trevion Henderson and Dallin Hayden to create, the best running back room in the nation. Steve brought up the joke about the name. That was a very lighthearted moment. I asked Quinshon about how much he knew about Big Ten football going into this and how quick of a study he's needed to be. And he's like, yeah, I didn't know much. I didn't know how big the Big Ten is. I mean, obviously with the addition of the 4 West Coast teams, I mean, it's that much bigger. And in week 7, I believe, he'll be part of a team going out to Oregon and doing that. Joked about it being cold up here. He's originally from Alabama. I'm sure they have some cold moments, but not to the level that we have up here. And I understand certainly there are parts of this country that are colder than Ohio, but if you talk to any Southern recruiter, it is ice station zebra up here. I was in on the Caleb Downs interview as well. I mean, just, very impressive kid. I mean, he, I honestly think that he would have gone to Ohio State out of high school if Nick Saban was not on the table. I mean, I think even Alabama could have had the success that it had, and you just remove Nick Saban out of the equation. I think he would have picked Ohio State. Obviously, his relationship with Tim Walton is strong. I mean, he's, very impressed with everybody that's around. He was asked if he feels that he is that last missing piece in the Ohio State defense. And he's like, that's not really for me to say. I'm just here to compete and be elite. And I just want, I want everybody around me to get there. But as he kind of talked through it, it certainly did sound as if there is recognition that if everybody does their role, that this could be a very elite type of defense. Steve kind of touched on the other 3 players. I heard bits and pieces, as I said, but I think the overall feeling coming out of those interviews is, very well put together group of players. I mean, we're talking about guys with a couple years to 1 year of eligibility left. So they've kind of gone through the wars. They've already been kind of coached how to talk to the media, and they all did a good job.
We have seen, off the top of my head, 3 of the best players in the SEC transferred to the Big Ten: Judkins, Downs, Caden Proctor, Alabama to Iowa. And we all hear it out of their mouths, whether they believe it or not, or how much it's drilled into them about the SEC being the superior conference. That's where you go to play to prepare yourself for the NFL. It's almost like playing in the NFL because everybody on the field's an NFL player, and you just hear this rhetoric from the players that seem to get passed down from the coaches, the media, and everyone else. It would be interesting to get their honest take of what they truly believe, whether they just were spitting out the rhetoric and they're just moving on to another competitive conference that they think is just as good, or they want to see it proven to them that the Big Ten is just as good as the SEC.
I think that that's the question to ask them after they play in a couple of league games. I mean, you can't, you're whether or not you're a Big Ten team or an SEC team playing a MAC team in week one. Generally, we kind of know how that is going to work out if you're in the upper division of your conference. So let them, let's see after a trip to State College or whatever. I'm not even going to sit there and say Oregon. I mean, that's not a Big Ten. We've not seen any legacy programming on Big Ten Network for Oregon or Washington or USC or UCLA at this point. But I think when it comes down to it, football is football to these guys. And yeah, I think there probably is a bit of a point of pride for SEC players just with the amount of success that the conference has had through the years. And taking off a Big Ten team won the national championship this year. I mean, they still grabbed the lion's share of the CFP era and the BCS era and everything else. I think they'll come to a realization that football is football in the Power Two, and just you're going to sit there and draw some bad teams here and there in the Big Ten and the SEC. You can play Vandy and Arkansas and South Carolina as of late.
Tony, how's it going today?
Good. Sorry, I had a Benadryl-induced nap and I slept through my alarm, so I apologize. I am back here, but I'm doing well. I would say those players need to talk to me after they've been to Northwestern in 60 to 80 wind, mile per hour winds, and then we could talk about the SEC versus the Big Ten or anything like that. But I thought yesterday was a really good opportunity just to get to know some of the guys a little bit better, and talking about the honesty. Nobody said they came to Ohio State for the NIL, so there was that.
Was there anyone? So we, or you, when I say we, sorry about the extension there. I tag myself onto all you guys. We got to hear from everybody but Julian Sayin, correct?
Yes, that in terms of the transfers and Sayin
Yes.
being a true freshman, we may get him if we get the rest of the true freshmen, the early enrollees at some point in the next couple of weeks, which would be fantastic. We'll see if that happens though.
So anyone in particular impress you or say anything out of the ordinary that is like, okay, well, that's interesting, or that's a different kind of take?
Well, Caleb Downs did say he's looking forward to beating Michigan, so that was one thing. But I spent the entire 20 minutes of Will Howard's session over there just to get an idea of what the quarterback is going to be like at Ohio State, assuming he wins the job. And he talked about how he prides himself on being tough. And of course, during that same interview, he had to scooch away a spider that was near him. And it was pointed out that, hey, Will, you got a spider next to you. And he's like, well, I don't like spiders. So, you got this big, tough, 6'5", 240-pound quarterback. But, then the spider issue popped up. But just getting an idea of him, how comfortable he was with the media. Because I think other than Downs and maybe McLaughlin to a certain extent, these guys have never really seen anything like this in terms of a media scrum. And so just to see how they operated there. And, I thought Will Howard talked about, and I wrote about it today. You can find it at BuckeyeHuddle.com, just about how the decision basically came down for him to the NFL and Ohio State. And the NFL told him, you're about a third to sixth rounder, and we would like to see more. And so that's one of the reasons he came to Ohio State. But I think he said the biggest reason was to win a national championship. So I think, he's looking forward to being able to throw the ball around. I think I'm looking forward to seeing how good he can be, because like I said in the past, I still think there's a question about how consistent and accurate he can be downfield. And I don't think we'd have to wait too long to find out if he can be that guy this year.
Just so Will Howard's not afraid of boa constrictors, I guess, would be the most important thing.
I
think. Go ahead, Steve.
No, go ahead and finish what you were saying, Tony.
No. I'm good. I'm done.
I was just going to say, I sent the video of McLaughlin and Caleb Downs to our Alabama site, and our 24/7 site. We have some newer people there because the site we had went to On3, and now we're like breaking in new publishers at Alabama. They're people who've covered the team for a long time, just not with us. And they said, "Oh, you guys get to talk to players. You get to talk to the transfers." They said the first time that they've ever talked to any of the transfers was during the mandated full team media scrum at the Rose Bowl before the national semifinal game. So that'll give you an idea, I guess, how the other half lives. But Kevin and I know from our friend Roddy down at Georgia how oppressive their media policies are. But Ohio State, to their credit, is trying to give its adoring media masses something to chew on in this very long and dismal and bleak off season. So that's a good thing.
And Saban doesn't let him talk to the assistants either during the season. Is that correct?
I think that may be true as well. Yeah. Of course, he's gone now, so who knows how Caleb DeBoer, how he's gonna 5 years out, how that's gonna go. But
well, it sounds like he's going to check with Nick Saban as to whether he's allowed to do that, because he says he's going to touch base with him every day, and Nick's going to have the mighty tower above the stadium and the office view that's going to oversee everything. And
Emirata.
The eye of Sauron, the eye of Saban watching over.
I picked up on Ryan Day was on ESPN radio about 4 or 5 days ago. And really the only thing, I don't know if any of you picked up on that. Kevin said he didn't come across that. I just read some of the quotes, but the only thing of note to me, because everything else was pretty standard, Bill O'Brien's got all this experience. He's great. The quarterback room's going to be fun to watch, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Pretty standard fare. Was when asked about the transition from Jim Harbaugh to Sherrone Moore, he said absolutely nothing about Michigan. He said Nick Saban retired, and there's going to be a lot of changes across college football. I tell my team to stay focused and just think about our team, and there are always going to be a ton of changes across college football, so we just have to be used to that. So with that said, I would like to take on the transition from Harbaugh to Sherrone Moore. It was no big surprise. I think it all laid out for us. He was the choice for the final 3 games. They won the final 3 games. He cried. They won. So that worked out, I guess. And it certainly did. Yes. So Kevin, Sherrone Moore's the choice.
Michigan lied and Sherrone cried. I'm going to file that one away for some point. But yeah, it was the logical choice in terms of not seeing your program going through an internal gutting the way that Alabama did, making the internal hire. I mean, Sherrone did coach several games this season, served his own suspension. So that's pretty interesting that a coach that served a suspension was elevated to the permanent full-time big doggy head coach. I don't think that happens all that often. Michigan, pure Michigan. I don't know how well. I mean, we don't always see internal hires work out. I think Ohio State fans will be the first ones. Well, Urban tapped Ryan, and we haven't won anything since then. So, I'm not exactly going to go there, but Larry Coker certainly is one of those internal hires that we can all, draw from history of where that went. I think the biggest thing is that Jesse Minter is following Jim Harbaugh out to California. The strength coach of Michigan is following Jim Harbaugh out to California, and I think that people were probably more upset about that one than anything, because it feels like Harbaugh is burning the boats as he goes out west. And, I think Michigan fans thought that this was going to be okay, here's your Laurel and Hardy handshake and off you go, and you'll leave everything else in place. And dynasty, here we come. And I think the very real, response now is coming in is that, oh, gee, we're maybe not as deep as we thought we were. So I don't know. I'll be very interested to see where we are at the final weekend in November, and where Ohio State and Michigan are. And we already know a lot of the implied stakes that are going to be on the line there, because if Ohio State can't do it this year, ooh, Nelly, it's going to be a rough offseason. I'll say that.
Steve, any thoughts on the big transition up north?
Well, it's going to be a struggle, I think, and the biggest issue is, as everyone said, this is going to be the greatest NFL draft ever for Michigan people, like 14, 15 guys chosen or whatever. And to me, who's coaching them is important. For the overall arc and the trajectory of the program, you've got to recruit, you got to hire great people, and for the overall long-term health of the Michigan program, those are the areas that need to be addressed. So the jury's out. Is Sherrone Moore going to sign top 10 classes, top 15 classes? Is he going to hire the best assistants that money can buy to help him keep Michigan on top? And I don't think we know the answers to those questions. Those are going to come out over time. I think it doesn't help that Harbaugh is taking people with him to the NFL, but you get a chance to go work in the NFL. Certainly that's where you would go. 9 times out of 10. I mean, it depends if you're a position coach in the NFL and you have a chance to be a coordinator at Michigan. What do you do? I mean, those are similar type jobs, maybe even similar type paying jobs. I don't know. So, any rate, I think the long term it's kind of murky, because you honestly can't say whether he's going to have the staying power to build this thing and continue to build this thing, because again, a lot of it's like you're building like one of those Jenga things, and you're stacking blocks on top of one another, but they've pulled out Minner, and he was one of the key blocks at the bottom of that pyramid. And they're pulling out the strength coach, and he was one of the key blocks at the bottom of that pyramid, and Corum and McCarthy. And, you keep pulling blocks out, enough blocks come out of that, eventually the thing tumbles. And so unless you have just as sturdy a block to shove in that spot, Donovan Edwards, takes on a little bit more of a role, or, whatever, as you kind of, and my names and whatever, the names aren't all that important. It's the impact of the people is what's important. And Harbaugh had a group of people, we can joke about the cheating all we want, but, they wanted a high level, cheating, no cheating. They wanted a reasonably high level and did things that, nobody at Michigan has done, before or since, so it to me, in the modern era, I mean, this is, the highest point Michigan's ever been, even higher than 97, I think. So, I guess I just want to wait and see on him. You have to be a little bit skeptical, because there aren't many people who've, stepped in and taken over a program like this and maintained it. And so, I guess we'll see. But, I mean, Kirby Smart, is a guy that stepped in and took Georgia even to greater heights, after he was given that chance. So I guess give the guy a chance and see what happens. I'm not overly optimistic, and, we'll just play it by ear, I guess, on that. And I love the jokes and the memes that came out. If Ryan Day was born on third base, they've got the picture of Harbaugh rocking Sherrone Moore like a baby and setting him down on home plate. So Your move, bro.
I think one of my questions is basically, is Sherrone Moore the best that Michigan could do in terms of getting the head coach? And right now, I could be convinced that he is, because I do wonder how attractive the job is right now until coaches know exactly what's going to happen at Michigan with the NCAA. But I also think that Sherrone Moore can improve the recruiting over Jim Harbaugh. I think that's a distinct possibility. The last 3 years, I think Michigan has been on average the 13th ranked class in the nation. And over Jim Harbaugh's first 4 years, they only had one class that was worse than 13th, or only one class outside of the top 10. And that was 2018 with the number 22 class for some reason. But the 23 class was 17th. I don't know exactly where the 24 class ended up. I think somewhere outside of the top 10. But I think Sherrone Moore can increase those, provided that there are not significant sanctions and provided that they're also winning. I know everybody talks about how much they love them in terms of the people inside the program. And I also think this was done to maybe keep some people from leaving. Not that you would hire a coach just to keep a Will Johnson from leaving when you only get him for one more year, or Mason Graham when you only get these guys for one more year. Because frankly, I don't know that there's really if all of the great players that remained at Michigan left, I don't even know if there's enough to call it an exodus. You would just call it those 4 guys have left. And so you still have to go get the best guy to do the job. He is a first-time head coach, as long as we're not counting the 4 games that he was a head coach this year, kind of like when Ryan Day in 2019 was a first-time head coach, even though he had 3 games of head coaching experience. But earlier in the week, I went back and looked at like the top 25 programs in the final AP poll, and 10 of those guys were the head coach of 10 of those programs. That was their first head coaching job. So they had been assistant coaches before they took over, and they weren't all internal hires or anything like that, but there was their first head coaching job. So, I don't think there's a tremendous issue with Michigan hiring an assistant coach. Ohio State did it. Oklahoma's done it the last 2 times. Georgia's done it the last 2 times, and it's worked out exceptionally well for them. So, the idea that you have to go get some established head coach, I don't think that's true. I just think you have to find the right guy, and for Michigan, also the guy willing to take the job at this point that you have confidence in, that and I think that's a very short list for Michigan.
I do want to add to Tony's point, though, that when Sherrone was head coaching at Michigan, Jim Harbaugh was there every day but game day. The Ryan Day time, I believe Urban was like, we're just going to turn off your code at the Woody and we'll see you after the TCU game or whatever that was. And
Dennis will explain to you what's happening over the dinner table.
Right. That's right. So
that's how you'll find out.
I'm not trying to.
He will bring you a device that you will plug into your computer and you can watch practice.
I'm not trying to diminish, what Sherrone was able to do. I mean, I think, certainly in the Ohio State game, he called a much more aggressive game. He played to win the game, and, Ohio State played the game. But it's going to be a lot different when you're not going to have the established name face of Jim Harbaugh there 6 days a week at Schembechler Hall going through it. So, I think there are some differences there. And when the suspension came out and how it was put in there of, you can do everything. You can buy the groceries. You can put the groceries away. You can do the mise en place. You can do all of this stuff, but you can't eat the food versus, you're just out. I'll be interested. I mean, I'm not trying to play to an audience and be like, well, Sherrone Moore is at Michigan, so therefore Sherrone Moore is bad. I'm looking at this objectively, and it's like I don't know. I don't know what this product is going to look like, and this upcoming Michigan schedule is going to test that team unlike it has been tested in previous seasons, just with Michigan playing real out-of-conference opponents, yes, Ohio State not necessarily playing great ones this year, but playing real, I mean, at least something that's better than Manny, Mo, and Jack. And then the way that the Big Ten schedule goes, especially with the lack of divisions moving forward.
But at least they hired somebody who knows what it's like to be under the thumb of the NCAA and knows how to handle a suspension should another one come along. He's got that kind of experience. And if you have a chance to hire somebody who's already been suspended for NCAA infractions, I think you have to do it.
So on his LinkedIn, does he have, where he puts your job skills, suspension experience, and then he's going to get a lot of spam from auto companies looking for him to sit there, and because he's worked on suspensions and everything else and alignments. All right, I'll show myself out.
And personal experience with suspensions as well for Sherrone. So yeah, I think it'd be foolish for anyone to say that they know how it's going to turn out. So when Kevin says, I don't know how it's going to turn out, nobody knows how it's going to turn out. And I think the best guess is that Michigan is going to be winning 9 or 10 games. That would be my guess, because it's a tougher conference. It's a difficult job to maintain what Harbaugh's done the last 3 years. And you put those two things together. Now, I tend to do what Tony does is in these situations say, okay, what does history tell us? So let's start there. What does history tell us? And we go through all the first-time head coaches, and then we also go through the list of coaches that have been elevated within the program. And it turns out to be much more impressive than you would think, because my default would be, let's go get an experienced, proven coach. But they also have what they consider to be, and I'm not saying this sarcastically completely, that they have a culture that they want to maintain. So they may be under different circumstances firing Jim Harbaugh after 2020, then it's a different decision. But after what they've built with the core that they've built it with, and Sherrone Moore being in the middle of all that, and he must have impressed somebody when there was a 3-game tryout and he was the guy then 6-8 weeks later that was the chosen one to lead them for the 3 toughest and most important games, then that was our indicator.
Yeah, Mark, I do think it's important that when you set the expectations for Michigan, you can't look at these past 3 years as the expectations for Sherrone Moore. I think you have to look back to the BCS era. And when I say BCS, that means before Connor Stallions. So you look back to what they would do before Connor Stallions, and that's 9 wins, 3 losses a year.
I'm dead with the BCS comment right there. I can't top that. I should just leave right now. Tony has won the episode.
My favorite line is they're going to be back to 4-8 and losing to Toledo before we know it. So Larry Lage, the great AP writer from Detroit, with the lead on that story. Holy Toledo! Exclamation point. That goes down in AP annals. So there you go.
Ohio State does have the best track record when it comes to
Playing Ohio,
making sure that they beat who they're supposed to beat. Somebody posted recently in the last couple of years, the last time each Big Ten team lost to a Group of 5 team. And of course, we have to go back to John Cooper's game in Memphis against
walking in Memphis
Air Force in the Liberty Bowl on that cold and rainy night, versus everybody else has been the last 5, 6, 7 years, something like that.
Yeah, that year. What do Ohio State and Iraq have in common? They both got their asses kicked by the Air Force.
Do you know that game? I don't remember exactly which year that was, 89, 90, whatever it was.
90, yeah.
90. I think that bowl game was played in like December of 90, and it was a blizzard in Columbus, and we still drove from Circleville up to the Beer Stube because we had to be at the Beer Stube to watch the Ohio State bowl game. And I can remember at halftime, I drove, and I'm like, guys, I looked out the window, and it wasn't getting any better. I was like, guys, why don't we get back in the car and go home while it's still safe to do that? And everybody's like, would you please just shut the bleep up and sit the bleep down was what I was told, because I wanted to leave the Ohio State Bowl game to go and safely get back home. So I got voted down.
Yeah, Steve, you can't do that. You might have missed a couple 3 and outs. So
yeah, God, that was pathetic.
Can't do
23
that.
to 11 or something like that.
Yeah.
That was
It's a 17-point favorite.
You're bringing me back to my undergrad days. I mean, God, these are just such warm and fuzzy feelings I'm having. I'm sure I was at my fraternity house and just ready to kill somebody.
Yeah. If you're like me, compare how much you cared about that game versus how much you cared about this year's Cotton Bowl. Those games were like life and death to me. All right, folks, appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. Please smash the like button. We appreciate your contributions as well. And catch Tony and Kevin at BuckeyeHuddle.com. It's the Big Me podcast for Kevin. It's Buckeye Weekly for Tony. It's 247sportsbucknuts.com for Steve. And we also have a Big Ten live show here where you can call us on Friday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern. Yakov, appreciate you being here. 2024 win total will be set at 10.5 or 11 ? Or 10 3/4 maybe.
They'll set it at a half just to keep
They
the
should.
action. 11.5 is bold to set it there, but with that non-conference schedule, you almost have to. 10.5 seems like, wouldn't more people take the over at 10.5 and take the under, whereas the 11.5 is kind of more of a legitimate question. And to expect anybody to win 12 games in a regular season is a little bit excessive. But like I said, with that non-conference schedule and what the people that Ohio State has bringing back and the momentum they have in terms of how great people think they're going to be, it almost seems like you get more action for yourself. Vegas would do better going with 11.5 than 10.5 because everybody's going to be banging the over on 10.5.
Yeah, I agree with Tony's point, but I don't know if I can accept it because, well, I'm trying to be cordial. That's a big ask. I mean, 11.5 is a big ask for anybody, especially a team that is breaking in a new old quarterback and showed some definite deficiencies on its offensive line. And on paper, we can talk about how all these things have been fixed or addressed or are in the process of being addressed. But with road trips to Eugene and to State College, I mean, if Ohio State just splits those, I mean, they're at, I mean, their cap is 11 right there. And that doesn't even put the game at the end of the season against Michigan on the table. And of course, you can make the argument, well, Ohio State's dropped 3 of them. And you can make the other argument of, on paper, this, should be a walkover for Ohio State. And of course, our 2 or 3 Michigan people in there are going to lose their, what about that? I think that if you're trying to, I think that the true line should be 10.5. But Tony is probably right in terms of everybody is going to bang the over on that one. And it's one that, Vegas never truly takes a bath, but it could be one that they end up regretting if they set it too low.
I do think it'll be 10.5 though.
I'm looking at the national championship odds, and right now it's Georgia plus 300, Ohio State plus 500. So they're not far. They're the number 2 favorite right now, at least in terms of that. I was looking for an over-under if anything was posted, but don't see anything on that just yet. So, maybe sooner rather than later we'll get that, but I don't know.
Ohio State will be favored in 11 games at least, and we'll see what happens with that Oregon game. But 11.5 is just a lot.
It is. I mean, we every year, even 8 weeks into the season, well, there's going to be like 30 undefeated teams at the end of the year. Well, mathematically, there can't be. And, and we just see people drop dumb games. Ohio State doesn't generally drop the dumb game. I mean, maybe 1 or 2 of the years against Michigan, we could sit there and say it was kind of dumb of them to lose. But we haven't had the Iowa, we haven't had the Purdue or whatever. I think a lot of people are going to say, well, Ohio State had no business losing that Missouri game. And on, looking from the top down, yeah, I guess if you're just looking at the names on the front of the jerseys and the helmets, you can say that. But you got to remember just kind of the position where Ohio State was in. But we're going to, a lot of years we have 3, 2, none, undefeated teams. So that's you're trying to thread a small eye of a very small needle with this one.
Well, looking at the win totals from this past year, preseason win totals, Georgia was 11.5, and Ohio State and Michigan were both 10.5, and then you had Alabama, USC, Clemson, all 10. But yeah, there was just one 11.5 last year, and that was Georgia. And I don't believe they made it. Did they make it? They did make it.
12-0. Well, can we expect that regardless of whether it's 10.5 or 11.5, that they're just going to adjust it by just waiting the money payout on either side, especially if it's 10.5, where you're not going to win too much if you take the over? They'll really compromise that, and it won't be even money on either side, whatever the minus 110 that you typically see on an even bet.
Yeah, they will certainly adjust it. That this is lines are set to try and get equal-ish money on either side of it, and go from there. I mean, so yeah, I think that it will be something that adjusts, and I'll be interested to see when some of these early futures bets really come out to be able to get in on, and if I can double up my money a couple more times, not to take this into basketball territory on betting against Ohio State, I'll have a lot of future bets to make in football.
David Greenshield, appreciate you being here, man. Oh boy, here we go. Mark, Michigan, have a culture of cheating. Your largest fan base will be leaving soon. I will try and bring you Ohio State fans. Well, please do that, David. Bring all sorts of fans. We would like to see Wake Forest fans, Stanford fans, whoever you want to bring. They all contribute. Well, they don't contribute the same, but they potentially do. So we certainly like that. I'll be producing a video here shortly that will be very one-sided in the Michigan direction unless they're able to read between the lines. So we'll just throw that out there and see what they have to say. Maybe much like a Miami video I produced a couple months ago where I pointed at Miami fans and said on my channel and said, thank you so much for being reasonable Miami fans and not like this idiot that I saw on social media. And I showed the post, which was basically wink, wink. You are that same person, folks. All right. Thank you, David. Appreciate that. Yes, bring us some fans. This Michigan transfer portal, obviously, this could be another reason why they went with Sherrone Moore. I'm not thinking it's number 1, 2, or 3 on the list, but maybe it's number 7 on the list that we keep this coaching staff intact, or at least the lead guy is a main core member, and we will avoid the pitfalls that have faced Alabama and Washington in particular and cascaded down from there at Arizona and San Jose State, because we've seen nobody out of the Michigan contingent in the portal other than maybe a backup defensive tackle.
No, but everybody is Twitter sleuthing and Insta sleuthing and seeing who's following who on there, and everybody's got one of their D tackles, one of their starting D tackles with 4 feet out the door and everything else. So we'll kind of see, because I think that people are going to be like, okay, well, we know that obviously Jim Harbaugh's leaving, and okay, it sounds like Jesse Minter's leaving, but then once the strength coach leaves, I don't think anybody's that concerned about Jay Harbaugh leaving at tight ends, but it still could trickle down, and you don't know, and Michigan still does have a group of sophomores that are pretty good. I mean, I hate to say that for the for the benefit of all the Ohio State fans here, but they still have some solid dudes that are on that roster. And to Mark's point, and I mentioned it even earlier in the show, yeah, you do hire internally if you feel that is the best you can do or the best option to try and keep the mass exodus or the exodus from occurring. But it's funny. There's a Twitter account out there called Message Board Geniuses, and they take screenshots of message boards from across the nation in college football. And there was already a Michigan fan, and I can't do the due diligence to know if they're really a fan or if they're a plant or whatever. And they're all like, Sherrone just needs to hurry up and bomb out because we're going to fall further and further behind everybody else until we can go and do a real external search. And I was like, damn, that took less than a week. That took less than a week to get to that point. So I guess the higher the expectations, the deeper, the deeper the pit of despair that awaits.
Folks, we do appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. We do this each and every Wednesday unless we got to switch around schedules. So please subscribe, hit that bell for the notifications to know when we go live. That way you can keep up with the schedule. But 11 a.m. Eastern time on Wednesday is typically the deal. And we got an Amazon link in the description section of all the videos. So please check it out because it is completely transparent to you. Doesn't cost you a penny and helps contribute to the show, the channel, everything we do here at the Voice of College Football. Kevin, do we have a recruiting update? Anything going on out there? People have put in the chat that James Laurinitis is giving smoke signals, Morse code, something on Twitter that is leading us to believe something.
But we don't have enough of a track record to know every time he posts "the" in all caps, if that is coming off of a great in-school visit, if that's a precursor to a boom. I mean, there are even people are like, oh, he's just, he must have just been elevated permanently to one of the 10 counting coaching spots. I'm like, I don't know if he's necessarily going to try and scoop himself at that point. I know that he's certainly been very active on the road, gone in to see Tarvos Alford out of Vero Beach, Florida, a linebacker there who I really like Ohio State's chances of landing. But no, I'm unaware of anything that is breaking in this moment because there have been other "the" posts and it hasn't necessarily led immediately to the announcement of a commitment. So I don't think that we have the map legend on this one yet to know exactly what classified and what requires this type of social media post.
Is this maybe like his version of when recruits drop a top 4 or top 5 list? It's like "the" has made it to the top 3 of somebody's list. You just don't know about it yet. I will also say, when he does finally get hired, he's not going to tweet out "the." He's probably going to tweet out "me," and that will be the signal that he has been promoted. It'll be more about him than about the Ohio State.
I went through the top 500 players in the country, according to one of the services, and then the composite as well. And there's about 20 that are unsigned, but I'm sure most of those are very hard commits that have been made in the last couple of weeks. So is there any possible drama out there connected to Ohio State for a week from Wednesday?
I mean, they're going to get this, Dominic Kirks will sign. I mean, he's committed to Ohio State. Fans were hoping that Ohio State was going to be able to maybe move in on Dominic McKinley out of Louisiana. As quickly as people got excited about that, he committed to LSU. That doesn't seem to be moving in any other direction. I don't really see a scenario of where they move in on any other 24 players because you are going to have to, you're going to have to settle your books at some point. And those books say you got to be at 85. There's a lot of debate because the NC2A likes to keep things cloudy of when you really have to be at 85. I've heard 18 different versions, but I will say something I do know. summer enrollees are not counting against Ohio State's 85 at this moment. So that's how you can kind of get away with spring because of that. But if Ohio State were to add anybody in 24, that just means another player that would have to move on. So you don't just go out there looking for the brightest, shiniest bauble on the counter just for the hell of it. You need to make sure that every kid you bring in, you see a path for.
Okay.
I agree.
Steve agrees.
Yep.
Kevin gets the gold star.
Yeah, Kevin is on top of all this. When I need to know what's going on, I ask Kevin what's going on. So
when I need to know what's going on, I ask Mark Gibler what's going on because he follows this a lot closer than I do. I'm his sidekick on our Skull Session Recruiting podcast. I know enough to be dangerous, but that's about it about these things. But for the Laurinitis, I feel pretty confident in what I said in terms of we don't know the map legend here yet as to what gets said. Maybe at some point we will get to talk to him, and maybe we can even ask him about that. And I'm sure he'll be like, "Oh, I don't know. I just tweet how I want to.
Tweet what I feel."
All right. I think we've come to a conclusion here, folks. Appreciate you all stopping by. We got Kevin at BuckeyeHuddle.com. What's going on there this week?
There's going to be a lot to unpack from the transfer interviews. I have moved my Big Me Kickoff to 3 days a week. I will be recording and dropping an episode today. Just kind of have to figure out what to talk about. I may talk about Tennessee and the NC2A and the NIL battle that is now leading to courtrooms and hurt feelings and everything else. And as we all know, the NC2A loves it when you sit there and poke at them and antagonize them. So that should be fun. We'll see what else we can talk about, and we will do a live show on Friday.
The NCAA has instantly been emboldened to go after some of these programs. I didn't see that coming necessarily based on their actions or lack thereof for the first year and a half or two.
Yeah, it's people are bringing up antitrust violations and different things like that. And it's like, you're a voluntary member of the association. I mean, either you agreed to abide by the bylaws or you didn't. And so I don't know. I just, what's right, what's wrong? I don't know. I honestly don't know. So I'm, you can put what I know about what's going on with NIL and with thimble, I guess, and that would probably solve it. So other than watching Ohio State stumble through another basketball game last night, one guy said, just blow it all up and go buy some guys who can actually play. So there you go. If it was just that easy.
I do think, and I am not a lawyer, I think Tennessee, the Attorney General, is a pretty good case based on the fact that the inducement thing, like the quarterback that they went and got, Nico Iamaleava or whatever his name is, however it is actually pronounced, like there's no law stating that you can't engage with the high school players from his state, and that's what the collective did. And there's nothing in any of the paperwork saying you must come to Tennessee. So it's like there are enough loopholes that you can just exist in these loopholes. And if anybody knows how to exist in loopholes, it's Congress and the people that pay them to do their jobs. I'm not talking about the public. I'm talking about the billionaires. But there's nothing in any of the paperwork saying you must come to Tennessee. So I'm not sure what the NCAA is going to be able to do. I do agree with Steve that everybody agreed to exist in this in a gentlemanly fashion, but now we also exist in a society where I don't care about being gentlemanly. I'm just going to and do what I want to do, and then I'll have people that support me for it.
Meanwhile, at BuckeyeHuddle.com and everything else going on with Tony this week, what is that?
We'll be, obviously, as Kevin said, we're still unpacking the player interviews. I've already thrown up story on Will Howard about what brought him to Ohio State. We got a story from Caleb Downs yesterday. We'll have Quinshon Judkins up there today. I'll be writing today also about how Ohio State is planning to replace Marvin Harrison, because I'm working on a series of how they're replacing their departed starters. So Marvin Harrison is the next one up. Should not be an issue. He was only a very average player, so Ohio State should be just fine doing that.
Marvin.
I see. I should probably just keep this chat rolling after we leave the air and let Ohio State, Michigan fans just go at it for a couple hours. Steve, what's going on in Bucknuts?
Well, again, just keeping really busy. We posted I did a story about Howard, and somebody else, Dave Biddle, did one on Caleb Downs, and I know that he and Pat are working on the other 3 players today as well, Judkins and Kasmerick and McLaughlin. So they're all working on that. And again, as I said, we're very impressed. I think next week we're probably in line to have either some of the guys who returned as juniors, perhaps some assistant coaches, perhaps Ryan Day. I don't know. There'll be some type of interviews, it sounds like, next week as well. I get maybe Day would probably hold off, I don't know, until he hires the 10th assistant coach, which it is kind of interesting to me if that's Laurinitis or, whatever it may be. But that hasn't happened as of yet by January 31st. But they don't start practicing for another month. So between now and then, I'm sure they'll bring somebody on board and give that person a whole list of responsibilities. So that'll be interesting when that day comes. But otherwise, just tracking that collection of stiffs that was playing last night against number 14 Illinois. They played much better than they did against Northwestern, which they didn't fall behind by 35 points. So that's a relative term, I suppose, but still didn't have enough to get the job done. And big women's game on Sunday, Indiana at Ohio State. I think it's on Fox Sports 1 at noon. That's a top 15 or top 10 matchup on Sunday. So contemplating going to that. But otherwise, that's about it right now.
Folks, you're welcome to continue your trash talking on the other team's turf there. Michigan Wolverines live Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern time. That's every Tuesday on the Michigan channel. We've got a Big Ten call-in show Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern time. Kevin, Tony, Steve, thanks for making this happen each week, and we will make it on back here next week, folks.
Thanks.
Yep.